60 Minutes Rewind.
When we ask the question, whose life is it anyway, we're not kidding. The announcement a week ago of the first analysis of the Human Genome Project, the blueprint that defines the human body, truly raises that question. It also raises the possibility of preventing or curing a whole host of diseases. The race to identify our genetic makeup was equal only to the rush by the biotech industry to patent those genes. That's right, patent them, just like Thomas Edison's light bulb. At least 1,000 human genes have already been patented and thousands more are pending, which means that chances are your genetic structure and mine, our most private property, may well belong to someone else. By all rights, Steve Crone should be dead, a gay man who was regularly exposed to the AIDS virus over a long period.
There were too many people who died. I was too exposed, and I had lost about 70 to 80 friends. The thought was I'd be dead in a year, 2 years.
He felt like a walking miracle. Every time he was tested for HIV, more than 20 tests, he came up negative, and was finally convinced he carried some kind of immunity. So he offered himself up to the Aaron Diamond AIDS Research Center in New York, where researchers agreed to study him. When high doses of the AIDS virus failed to infect samples of Crohn's blood, doctors were stunned.
That surprised them. So then that established the fact that there was some natural resistance that they weren't aware of. And then that in turn led to the discovery of the genetic reason for that.
The reason was a genetic mutation, which produced cells that would not let the AIDS virus enter his system. It was a genetic oddity he soon learned he shared with another walking miracle, Eric Fuchs.
I continued to have tests, and they all came back negative. They then found out that it was a genetic defect, is the word. So it's a genetic, I'm defected.
The gene defect was a promising discovery for the research lab, something that might one day lead to a way of combating AIDS. The Aaron Diamond Center filed for a patent on the gene, but neither Crone nor Fuchs were listed as co-owners of their own genetic material.
After, taking our blood and all that, they broke off relationships with us.
But the fact is that without your blood...
That is correct. Without my blood and without Steve's blood, they would not have had this discovery.
In a letter to 60 Minutes, the Aaron Diamond Center claims that the gene patent has not resulted in any financial gain for the nonprofit organization. They state that Fuchs and Crone cannot be considered as co-owners as they did not contribute intellectually to the discovery of the gene mutation. But that doesn't satisfy Eric Fuchs.
It was my idea that I was immune. It wasn't their idea. Do I want to share in the patent? Yes, I do.
While technology takes us into a brave new world, the old world's laws are racing to catch up. Patents used to be reserved for inventions like the light bulb or the cotton gin. But in 1980, the Supreme Court ruled that a life form, a genetically altered bacterium used in oil spills, could be patented. As biotech companies began looking into gene research, that ruling became their license to patent human genes, and the gold rush was on.
Doctors are searching the globe looking at patients as potential treasure troves because they can use your blood to find a very lucrative gene.
Lori Andrews is an attorney who is also an advisor to Congress on biotech issues. She says that patents were never intended for products of nature like genes, which in her mind are hardly inventions.
The U.S. Constitution established the patent system to reward inventors. The idea that genes could be private property instead of public knowledge seemed absurd, and yet that's exactly the point we're in now.
When the late Jonas Salk came out with the polio vaccine, and he was asked why he didn't patent it, he said, quite famously,
"Could you patent the sun?"
Could you patent the sun? Nevertheless, all these years later, the Salk Institute holds hundreds of patents. How did we get from that altruistic approach to this?
I think that greed has become a cultural value in healthcare. And we are seeing a big change. I think we need to go back to that time.
That's unlikely in this age when one gene was responsible for the development of Epogen, a drug used in kidney treatment that's worth more than $1 billion in annual sales for its manufacturer. But even in areas that will not be so profitable, the genetic gold rush goes on. Ms. Andrews' clients, Dan and Debbie Greenberg, lost 2 children to a rare degenerative brain disorder called Canavan's disease.
When our children were born, basically nobody knew anything about Canavan's disease, and there was really no research whatsoever going on because nobody knew where to start researching.
Since Canavan's occurs only when both parents are carriers of a particular gene, the Greenbergs knew that isolating the gene might one day lead to a prevention or cure. They urged a geneticist, Dr. Reuben Matalon, to begin research into Canavan's disease.
We initially provided blood and urine samples from our 2 children, and he took multiple samples when he felt like he was onto something. And beyond that, we put him in touch with further families yet.
The Greenbergs and other families also provided seed money for early research, and the project was eventually financed by Miami Children's Hospital. After a few years, Dr. Matalon discovered the Canavan gene.
It was a wonderful accomplishment.
Do you think that without your help and the help of other families that he and Miami Children's could have proceeded with their work?
Absolutely not.
But Greenberg was shocked to learn that Miami Children's had patented the gene and was charging a royalty every time a Canavan screening was performed anywhere. The Greenbergs and other families are suing the hospital on grounds of breach of informed consent.
We never knew they had even applied for a patent. Nobody ever asked us if we would consent to that, nor did they ever suggest that was their intent. The whole premise on which all of this research was done was based on doing something good for mankind, not for making money.
In a letter to 60 Minutes, Miami Children's wrote, "It's highly unlikely the hospital will ever recoup the millions and millions it spent on this research that now offers couples a method of determining the probability of having a child with Canavan's." Patent protection, says Todd Dickinson, former head of the U.S. Patent Office, is the engine that drives great discoveries.
It was costly to develop, and they're recouping their costs, and the incentive to do even the threshold research would not be there if the patent system was in place to provide the kind of protection and the nurturing that new inventions need.
Invention is surely the wrong word here. Nobody invented that particular chemical process that takes place in your genes or mine.
What they did was discover the chemical composition of that gene, which was not known before. And as they discover those chemical compositions, then they are available for patent protection.
But Laurie Andrews says that scientists were doing pure research long before there were any economic incentives, and that gene patenting has changed medicine forever.
You can see how this is turning scientific research on its head. I mean, usually we share scientific knowledge when we find it so that many, many people are working on a cure. That's not the case now with these overreaching gene patents, where whoever identifies the gene to begin with controls any research on it.
Which may make perfect economic sense, but in the real world, the consequences could be tragic, could affect the health of every woman in the world. At the University of Pennsylvania, Dr. Haig Kazazian and Dr. Arupa Ganguly were testing women who might have a mutated gene that predisposes them to breast cancer.
I was naive. I didn't realize that there was a possibility we'd be shut down on this.
And you were doing some promising research, were you?
Yes, we were offering clinical testing, and then we were also going on beyond clinical testing and doing some research work on it.
And then you abruptly stopped.
On both counts.
Why?
Because it was viewed as an infringement on the patents owned by Myriad.
Myriad as in Myriad Genetics, a Salt Lake City biotechnology company which owns the patent on the 2 known breast cancer genes. Myriad sent the UPenn lab a cease and desist letter when they learned that they were performing diagnostic tests using their genes without a licensing agreement.
There really wasn't much we could do. We talked to our university lawyers. They said, really, we can't fight this. They have the law on their side.
They own an equation or a formula or something.
They own the sequence. They own the nucleotide sequence, the building blocks of the gene. So the only place in the world, essentially, now that you can have screening of the gene and testing of that gene is Myriad Corporation.
Myriad Genetics declined to be interviewed, but in the past, they defended their right to exercise control over the use of their patent, which means Myriad can have a financial interest in every breast cancer test that uses their gene.
The story will continue after this.
What is the effect of Myriad owning exclusively the rights to test for the breast cancer gene? And in terms of the cost, for example, of the test?
They can name their price.
Right.
The fee for looking at my gene in my body is $2,580 to Myriad Genetics. My doctor cannot look in my own body at my own breast cancer gene without paying a royalty to Myriad Genetics. That's absurd. Why should something in my body belong essentially to that company?
That fee is not just a royalty fee. That fee is the cost of the test.
Todd Dickinson says the Patent Office has long held the view that incentives to research must be maintained.
We charge for a lot of things that save people's lives. Pharmaceuticals that save people's lives have a price associated with them.
This isn't a pharmaceutical. This is merely a test. This is something that tells you, puts you on the alert to a predisposition.
Right. The work that went into developing that test was substantial. And I think that those institutions believe that they have the need to recoup some of that investment in the cost.
But the cost to the consumer could well rise beyond the reach of most people. One day it might be possible to be tested for hundreds of genetic diseases, which could cost thousands and thousands in royalties, and which could make patients hostage to patents.
It's a crisis in healthcare now because so much is going to be dependent on genetics.
Yeah, this is so naive a question. Does anyone come along to such a quote unquote doctor, scientist, researcher, and say this is wrong?
I mean, you're so right about that, but they say, and I'm appalled since I'm a lawyer, they say, but it's legal.